welcome back to Wash Talk, the Carwash Podcast. I'm your host, Rich DiPaolo, and joining me today is Mack Ewing, Director of Strategic Initiatives for Turtle Wax Pro. Mack, great to see you. Welcome to Wash Talk.
Yeah, thanks so much, Rich. It's great to be here. And like I was saying in the lead up to this show, big fan of the show. You've had lots of great friends from the industry on. I think it's an awesome offering for people who are new to the industry, have been in it for a few years, or experts alike. So really appreciate the time and offering to be here today.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time to listen to these episodes, Mack, and especially for being a guest here today. I wanted to catch up with you on the topic of these different types of chemical formulations and their benefits to car wash operators on this episode. But first, why don't we start off with a little bit of your background and how you got started in the car wash industry?
I think I got started in the industry in a very different way than a lot of the people who are kind of my generation. So in their 30s now in the industry, I hear a lot of people who are kind of my peers who have been in the industry for maybe 5 years, kind of stumbled into it through one path or another. I always knew that I was going to be a part of the car wash industry from probably a very young age, like 3 or 4. My grandpa, Murray Ewing, started our company, Transchem, the owner of Turtle Wax Pro, in the early 70s. And he really focused on touchless cleaning innovations, on kind of being a pioneer and early adopter of concentrated chemistry, which is what we're here to talk about today. And my dad and my uncle, Nate and Tim Ewing, have been in the business for decades. So from a young age, it was pretty clear to me I was going to get sucked into the car wash industry one way or another. I started in technology, worked in tech startups, in the Toronto, Canada area for 5 or 10 years. And then kind of was always checking out the ICA shows with my family. So got to go to Vegas, Nashville, Chicago, international shows, a great way to dip my toes into the industry and see a little bit more about what was happening. But right before COVID, right before the pandemic in 2020, I just saw how exciting the car wash industry was. And, between the growth in the industry and kind of the innovation that was happening, along with knowing, you don't have forever to work with your family in a business like this, I decided it was a great time to make the jump. And, to be honest, I'm really happy I did that. My grandpa actually passed away suddenly this year, and he was still our CEO of the company right up until he passed early this year. So I'm honored to be a third generation of the Turtle Wax Pro, family that operates the business. And it's kind of been in my blood since I was born. So it was a foregone conclusion from day one, I think.
Very cool. And yeah, sorry to hear about the loss of your grandfather, and glad to hear you're enjoying this car wash industry as it changes so much over these past few years for sure. But Mack, we see a lot of different types of phrases and terms and buzzwords in chemical ads that we see in the magazine and online on carwash.com. So I was hoping you could help me decipher some of these different terms and in general, what are the primary differences between super concentrated and ultra concentrated and hyper concentrated chemicals?
Yeah, you said buzzwords, and I think that's a great place to start here. So whether you're talking about super concentrated chemistry, ultra concentrated, at Turtle Wax Pro, we call it hyper concentrated chemistry. These are really all marketing-led terms that cover the same concept, which is a product that is designed to be diluted with water at a location, so at the car wash, as opposed to a ready-to-use chemistry, which would be diluted with water at the source of manufacturing. And so, when you see these terms in the industry, because it's an unregulated industry, there's not a lot of standardization. There's a lot of marketing-led terminology like that. It can be confusing for an operator and for a distributor to understand what's what. So I think a good rule of thumb would be if you see the word concentrated in the product offering, likely that the product you're buying has vast majority of active chemical ingredients in the container that you're able to then dilute on site. So there's no formalized definition of concentrate levels. And I guess that is a challenge. It does present a challenge in some ways because, you'll occasionally see a term like double concentrate. But as an operator, I think you'd want to dig into that and understand, well, double what concentrate? There's no terminology that is standardized in our industry. And we got these terminologies in the industry by taking guidance from kind of adjacent spaces like consumer packaged goods. So, another good example would be looking at Tide Pods. You always see on the container of a Tide Pod, 10x the cleaning power, or, will clean twice the amount as the competitor. But you're looking at like, what cleaning power are you talking about? So when you look at concentrated chemicals, there's a few criteria you want to look at to understand what actually are you purchasing as an operator or as a distributor, and to understand that. And we'll definitely get into that later in the conversation today. But in general, when you see hyper concentrated, ultra concentrated, it's all the same terminology. It's just a different marketer, probably myself included, that are putting that on a label or on a website.
Obviously, one of the main benefits of a concentrated chemical versus a ready to use is easier shipping, taking out the water and adding it at the site instead of at the manufacturing facility. But can you name any other major benefits of these type of concentrated chemicals versus a ready to use product?
Yeah, absolutely. So you led into it well there. How concentrated chemistry was really initiated in our industry was the need to reduce the shipping volumes that are going to a car wash location. So as volumes of cars being washed increased per location over the last few decades, and now we're looking at probably back into the 60s and 70s, the need to ship less water in a container became prevalent because you have these busy washes that are now trying to wash up to 1,000 cars or more a day. You're not going to be able to do that with a ton of different containers of 30 gallons filled with water. So operators wanted to get more cars out of the same size container, and that's where concentrated chemicals have evolved from. When we talk about the pros and cons of concentrated chemistry, one thing I would preface by saying is there's definitely a spectrum of pros and cons comparing concentrates to ready-to-use products. And everyone in this industry who has great experience probably has a strong point of view on this topic. And so when I share pros and maybe even some cons of concentrates, I should say it is very much from the Turtle Wax Pro point of view. I think different people will have different things that work for them. Individuals who have decades of experience in the industry might say something different. And I think that's okay. That's part of the evolving dialogue in our industry as people figure out what works for them. And something I love about car washing is just operators are so passionate about their chemistry, about how they run their wash. So should preface by saying, different people have different opinions. But from my perspective, a few of the pros, probably the most important one is cost savings. So even though you have a container of product, a concentrated container of product that is more expensive than a ready-to-use container of product, you're likely going to get more vehicles out of that concentrated container of product. So you're actually spending less in chemistry per vehicle when you're using hyper-concentrated products or ultra-concentrated products. And so what an operator or a distributor would typically do is a cost per car analysis. And that's a tool that they would use to determine, how much it costs to wash each vehicle with different package types or different chemistry. And because concentrated chemistries are so customizable, they're so efficient, they're so accurate, you're able to dial that cost per car analysis in and the chemical you're using per application in to an extent that you can really make that expense per vehicle exactly what you need it to be and get the exact results you need to see. And so I think from that standpoint, it's very efficient. You're getting a lot out of a little container, and so you're saving on the usage. But I think more importantly, as we go forward and look at globalizing our industry as well, shipping costs and the environmental impact of shipping are two huge benefits of concentrated chemicals that I don't think could be overstated. You're shipping usable active chemistry to a location. You're not shipping a container that's half active chemistry and half water, as an example. And so you're very efficient with your shipping. you're using less emissions, you're using less plastic. So from the manufacturer all the way down to the operator, you're just seeing a lot less plastic emissions, waste overall. And that's, I think a huge advantage going forward, especially as we look at, continuing rising costs of transportation and the emissions that creates. A good example that's been explained to me of how to look at concentrated chemistry when I talk about the efficiency of using it in a wash is if you picture a glass of water. So, I have a glass of water in front of me and you have a container of red food coloring. With a concentrated chemistry, you're using that red food coloring and you're dropping it into the glass of water. And so you control the desired shade of red that you're getting in that glass of water. Whereas if a ready-to-use product, you would receive that glass of water that's already a shade of red. And so that kind of customization, the efficiency, the ability to control how the concentrate works in your car wash really allows that customization to permeate throughout your operation.
So important now, especially as materials and shipping costs are elevated compared to recent years these days. Having that insight on how much chemical cost per car down to the car is so important for operators to monitor. And just as you complimented my lead into the last question, you did a great lead into my next question here with some of your response there, mentioning the environmental benefits of these products, right? So car washes have always been considered more environmentally friendly than the alternative of driveway washing, and the International Car Wash Association certainly has done a great job showing the world that through their consumer studies, right? So one aspect of how a car wash can be even greener or more environmentally friendly is through the use of a water reclaim system, which a lot of operators, and especially new builds, have incorporated into their sites, right? So when it comes to water reclaim, are ready-to-use or concentrated chemicals better for these reclaim systems, and why?
Yeah, it's a thoughtful question, especially because I believe reclaim systems aren't typically well understood by most people, even in our industry. And so it's something that we get asked a lot. And the short answer is there's no difference in ready-to-use or concentrate chemicals when it comes to reclaim. The amount of water, in that container of initial chemistry doesn't play a role in that reclamation process because you are diluting concentrated chemistry on site. So you may be seeing more efficiencies with the chemistry you're using, but really what matters there is the ingredients that are being used in the chemistry that the reclaim system has to filter out. You can picture like that Brita filter. If we go back to my analogy of the red food dye in the glass, really at the end of the day, the operator is striving for that perfect shade of red, whether it's with concentrates or ready-to-use products. And so that Brita filter, when you pour the red glass of water into it, has to filter out the same initial ingredients. And so really, it goes back to the ingredients you're using in the chemistry itself.
Along that same vein, we talk about, waste and having to send things to the municipal sewer system, right? The byproducts of a car wash. So are there any special waste disposal requirements or even usage considerations that operators need to know when using these concentrated chemicals at their wash?
Yeah, similarly to how concentrates versus ready-to-use products work with reclaim systems, it does go back to the ingredients that the products are made out of. And since our industry is largely unregulated, like we started our conversation today discussing, it's up to the individual operator or their distributor or supplier to make decisions about the type of chemistry they use within the framework of their local government regulations. So there's some chemicals in our industry that still use kind of harmful phosphates or acids like a hydrofluoric acid that are not safe for individuals like you and I to handle, let alone, to be easily disposed of through a sewer system. So it's not safe to use without strong safety and regulatory processes in place. And we don't recommend or use some of those harmful ingredients. And so that's really what, as an operator or distributor, you want to be focusing on when you're thinking about waste disposal or usage considerations. And one resource, really, I would say the only way to understand truly whether the chemistry you're using has strong, effective, healthy ingredients for the ecosystem that you're working within is to look for certifications like the EPA in the USA, Eco-Logo in Europe, or Nordic Swan in Europe as well. So chemical suppliers will have this information listed on their websites. So for example, at Turtle X Pro, our About page, we take a lot of pride in focusing on here's the clean ingredients that we use, here's our commitment to sustainability in the active ingredients in our products. And I think a lot of our peers in the industry have that as well. So when you go to their websites, or if you're an operator considering what chemical to use, you go to that supplier's website or you ask your rep, they should have that information for you to make those informed decisions. But the one thing I would say when you're thinking about disposal requirements or usage considerations is this is a great marketing tool for an operator to push to an end consumer. So like you mentioned, when you're washing a vehicle in a professional environment, you're saving a substantial amount of water, and it's being reclaimed and put back into the sewer system in a way that's just much safer and more environmentally friendly than washing in the driveway. And so when you're going to a wash that does that, plus they have chemistry that's made with ingredients that the operator can take pride in and that are effective in cleaning but safe for employees in the environment, that is a marketing narrative that I think really resonates with consumers today, and I believe can be a competitive advantage for operators. So when asked about those considerations, that's one thing that we would really recommend for an operator to consider.
Unfortunately, operators don't have to be in it on their own to figure all this stuff out. There's resources in the industry. There's obviously reputable manufacturers out there like Turtle X Pro, who have worked with other operators around the country and might know the unique specific needs of a certain region or a certain type of car wash. So obviously ongoing training and being educated and having market awareness around these concentrated and ready-to-use chemicals is paramount. So I'll wrap it up with this question here, Mack, and I certainly appreciate you taking some time today to do this interview. But how do operators learn more about the best methods to work with concentrated chemistry?
Yeah, and I love this question because coming into the industry, 5 years ago or so, I was looking for a lot of the resources outside of just asking colleagues, asking friends in the industry, what does this mean? Or how do I learn more about this? And I hear a lot of that from new investors, especially, but just in general, people who are getting into the industry. It's growing so quickly. We need so many more professionals working in the car wash industry. Learning and development is probably one of the bigger gaps that I see in the car wash space, and something that I think we can all play a part in filling that gap, to our own benefits, right? So I think when you look at a subject like how to work with concentrated chemistry, what I would say is first, there's great resources, and again, not to go back to pumping your tires here, but PCND, this podcast, carwash.com, resources through the ICA, media in our industry has evolved a lot, even in the past 5 years. And I would say consuming content like this is a great way to dip your toe into understanding those basic concepts. From that, informal learning, networking with other car wash operators or other distributors, talking to colleagues in the space, going to trade shows like the Car Wash Show or the NRCC in the Northeast, I believe is the next major North American trade show coming up in October. Car Wash Show Europe is coming up in September. Going to those shows, attending them, talking to people. I find, everyone in the car wash industry is so generous with their time because they love it. They're so passionate about it. And I think that's really cool and very unique for the industry compared to others. So informal learning. And then formal learning, there's a lot of manufacturers I think are doing a good job of putting on summits for their customers or their distributors. They're focused on courses, online supplier content. So for example, at Turtle X Pro, we have an online resource called Turtle X Pro Learn. and we have about 40 hours of video content with a few courses that focus on working with concentrated chemistry. So as an operator, as a distributor, talking to your suppliers about what they have like that they could leverage is certainly something that I would recommend. And then if we take a step further to that, when we think about concentrated chemistry, if I was an operator starting to just consider that today, I would ask myself, how do I assess these concentration levels? Going back to the marketing terms, how do I know how concentrated this 5-gallon container of chemistry actually is? And I think there's some of the best metrics that as an operator you might want to look at are estimated cars per container. So for example, if I have a 5-gallon container, how many cars do we think we can wash with that container? Is it 500 or is it 5,000? And products like ours, a hyper-concentrated product, are going to be more towards that 5,000 number than the ready-to-use, which might be on the lower end of that spectrum. And then the other thing that an operator might want to look at is estimated usage numbers in milliliters. And so that's something that, again, a lot of suppliers, ourselves included, will publish this information publicly on their websites. And that allows someone to get started in exploring a little bit more about what these products are, roughly how much am I going to get out of each container, and then take that next step to actually having that dialogue with a supplier or a distributor to understand, okay, how could this work in the context of my car wash?
Very interesting. Well, we'll take those tire pumps all day long, Mack. We appreciate you reading our content and watching our podcast and listening to our podcast. Certainly appreciate the support. You're welcome back on Wash Talk anytime, and definitely enjoyed the conversation today. And happy belated Canada Day. I know a few weeks early with that, but or a few weeks late, I should say. But appreciate the conversation, and thanks again for doing this video interview with me today, Mack.
Awesome. Thanks so much for your work, Rich, and looking forward to talking again soon.